So there's a lot of people that want to know the secret to getting known or seen, whether that's on social media, whether that's throughout their work setting, and they want to be recognized for all the amazing work that they do. And I think this is natural, but I think that's the wrong question to ask as a human. Instead, you should be asking the question, how could I be so good that no one could ignore me? Like, how could you be so good that despite the politics, despite the biases, you are still on top because your excellence shines through? And once I understood this topic, it completely transformed my life. So we're going to talk about it in today's video. And I want to start this video off with a story. So many of you may know that I played competitive soccer for many years, and I've also played amongst and alongside some very talented other soccer players as well. And one of them being this one gentleman who was actually a family friend, and this guy was insane. He moved between different clubs, and at each team that he played at, he just got better and better and better. He was always a star player, he was always the captain, always leading the team into success and into victories. And then it came a point where he wanted to play for basically our professional team from where I'm from. And there's actually the professional team, which is what we call the first team, and just under the first team there's all the semi-pros and the pro levels. So he was trying out for the semi-pro team just to potentially make it up to the professional level. And I remember him and my dad were just constantly talking about his journey and what he was going through. And one of the things that he was struggling with is he had to break through a lot of soccer politics. So if you guys play sports, you'll know, especially with team sports, there's a lot of politics involved. And the unfortunate thing, especially if you're from like North America, sometimes it's not always the most talented players that get pushed forward. It's a lot of times players with the right connections, with the right resources, and that kind of ruins the sport. So this gentleman was in a situation where he was among other players who had a lot of connections and leverage, and he had to really stand out amongst all these noise and all these players. And his dad was actually sharing with my dad at the time that, you know, when he first got to this team, they were barely giving him any playing time. You know, he was by far one of the best players, but he wasn't getting any shot because the previous star player was actually in the same position that he played, which was attacking midfield. So fast forward, this gentleman actually tried out for this team. He made it because he was so talented, and slowly but surely he was getting more playing time. He was getting more minutes on the field, and it became very apparent that he was much more talented than all his other teammates on the field. And it got to the point where the coach could not ignore his success. Like, he was by far the best player, scoring at every single tournament, getting scouted. And as the story progressed, he actually ended up being the captain of the team. And then from there, he actually made it to the professional leagues. He's still currently playing in the pros. And his story really reminds me of the important principle that we're talking about in today's video, is just being so good that they can't ignore you. Despite the politics, despite the favoritism, he was able to still shine through and become a straight success. And this player is so talented. I mean, he's been called up to the national team for his country. He's played at major tournaments, and I know that he's going to have an amazing career going forward. But we're going to talk about what happened. How can you be so good that nobody can ignore you? And some of you might have heard this concept of being so good that others can't ignore you, but we're going to talk about how to actually apply it in a real world setting. And one of the ways I've applied it was actually throughout school. So as mentioned before, some of you guys may know, school has always been something I've been relatively good at. I've had some peaks and valleys, but overall I've been pretty good at school. And one of my secrets is leveraging this concept of being so amazing that they can't ignore you. So, you know, oftentimes within a school project, let's say your teacher gives you an assignment, that they would give you out a rubric, and they usually within the rubric, they would outline, you know, what a low level mark is and what an exceptional grade is. So depending on the school and the schooling system you use, there was usually like from 80 to 100 for like a level 4, A+ example. And then there's like that B range, and then there's that C range, and then there's a D/fail range. And whenever I would get this rubric, I would always jump straight forward and look at the highest category, the level 4+ answers, and what exactly did that teacher want. And then from there, I would take that as my new baseline, my new standard, and then I would actually elevate what I add on top of it. So for example, if the teacher wanted us to present a topic on animals, and she was saying, you know, to have an amazing grade, you need to present these facts on these animals, you need to give some examples, you need to present some interesting studies, I would take all the things that would make a level 4, and then I would add my own rubric, my own criteria on top of it. This was my way of ensuring that I'm going above and beyond of what's being required of me. This became the new standard, this became the new blueprint, and this was one of my secrets to doing really well, especially across all my presentations, whether that was in high school, university, and as I continue to progress throughout my life. And it became so apparent that my project was so much better than a lot of others because most people were just relying on that rubric and just trying to aim for a level 4. I was using the level 4 as my baseline and then adding more things on top of it. So that might have meant getting the class involved in some exemplars, or including a really interesting video and really incorporating into the presentation. Just doing anything and everything just to ensure that I'm being so good that you cannot be ignored. And the best part is this process becomes addicting. It becomes fun and engaging because now you start to do that in other areas of your life. And for example, when we were in lockdown and we were undergoing the COVID pandemic, this was another opportunity for me to leverage being so good that they couldn't ignore you. So a lot of you guys know I played soccer throughout many years of my life. And as I mentioned earlier within the video, there's typically politics involved when you're playing team sports. And this was no different from when I was playing my team sport. I was involved in scenarios where there was like a coach's son relationship. So if any of you guys played on the team and the coach is also leading and his son or his daughter's on the team, you can notice some of the biases that go on there. Or I was also in examples where if certain people did certain things for the club, their players would get bonuses and more incentives than other players. So I was in that scenario when I was playing soccer, and that led me to like really having to differentiating myself amongst a group of players who were all relatively talented and who all worked hard. So during the pandemic, I remember this vividly, where we were all locked in our homes, couldn't really do much, but I wanted to take it upon myself, because soccer was my obsession and it was my life at the time, to really get better at my craft of being a soccer player. So I decided to dedicate myself to training 3 times a day. In the morning, I would do ball touches, and which would be these light drills in order to keep my footwork really sharp. Then I would do a workout either inside my house or outside. And then finally, I would go outside on the field and play for hours. And I did that every single day. And I knew that my teammates were not working that hard. I knew that they weren't keeping up their fitness. A lot of people during the pandemic actually had this mentality where they thought life was over. They thought life was always going to look like this. But I knew that I would be back on the field again. And I knew that when I got my opportunity, I wanted to be in top physical shape. And during that process, I fell in love with it. Again, I fell in love with becoming the best version of myself, but I knew that I was striving and becoming better every single day. It got to a point where when I started doing 3 workouts a day, my body was extremely sore. It was a lot of pain, but then it got to a point where 3 workouts became my new norm. My fitness improved. I became sharper on the ball. My touches got better. And it was crazy, because when we started practicing and the pandemic was slowly slowing down, that's when we all got together back as a team. And it was very apparent who kept their fitness and their conditioning back up and who was just slacking off during this entire period. It got to the point where when we were playing a team scrimmage, I was scoring 3 goals. My touches were immaculate. And I actually had parents who weren't my parents telling me, yo, whatever you're doing is working, keep it up. You stayed extremely focused during the pandemic and it's really showing. So that's another example of being so good that they couldn't ignore you. And a lot of you probably knew my story, but even during that time, I was still getting scholarship offers to play at top collegiate schools all across the country and outside of the country. And again, it went back to that same principle that I was sharing with you. It was just being so good that they couldn't ignore you. And I knew that if I was training 3 times a day, my competition was not dedicating themselves that persistently or with that much consistency. And the best part is that the results always show. So I knew that all these efforts weren't going in vain. They were going to be compounded later on. And that was really the foundation of learning how I can implement these across different realms. And now that you understand a few examples of how you can implement being so good that they couldn't ignore you, I'm going to actually talk about the strategies and the steps that you can outline so you can implement it across whatever domain you're currently working on, whether that's school, whether that's your personal career, whether that's a goal or a dream that you've always aspired to achieve. Let's break it down on how we can be so good that no one can ignore you and success will be inevitable. And the first thing that I'm a big believer of is learning how to track. You have to track your progress. Most people try to guess their way to success, and I personally don't believe that that is possible. Every single high performer, every single ultra successful person that I've met, from the 9-figure entrepreneurs to the elite students to the people who are in great physical shape to the best soccer players that I've ever played against, they've all tracked their success. Tracking is the only way that you will be able to measure your progress over a long duration of time. Tracking is a very addicting habit, and when you get to this point where you're constantly tracking things, you won't want to break your system or your cycle. For example, at the time of this recording, I currently track all the high leverage habits that I have to do on a consistent basis. I tally all those up and I give my own self a score report card so that I ensure that I'm on track to hit my goals and my targets. It is now transitioned for me from my goals aren't so much aspire to get these things, but rather my goals are more input focused, and that all goes back to tracking. I use apps like Notion, and in subsequent videos, I'm actually going to be outlining the entire process, sharing with you guys the entire system that I use on the back end of Notion, because it's a very powerful tool to really track your success across multiple domains. And if you're not tracking, it's going to be very difficult in order to make real progress and tangible progress towards your goals. When I look at tracking, I think of tracking like a game. You can really gamify your tracking and make it fun and addicting. So at one point in time, I was actually addicted to video games. I love playing the Fortnites and I love playing the Grand Theft Autos. Those are my 2 favorite games. But I realized it would be much more productive and much more powerful if I can take that same approach through gamification and apply it into my own life. And that gamification process has really been exciting through the process of tracking my success. And the best part about tracking is you have to be honest with yourself. You can see the days where you've slipped up and you can see the days where you've made consistent progress. And the last thing I'll say on tracking is it gives you the sense of being humble and reminding yourself that you have a very long way to go. And oftentimes I find a lot of people have a misconception of how much work they're actually doing. We often like to overinflate the amount of work we're doing. So I know a lot of people, when they go to the library, for example, let's say you go to the library for 4 hours. A lot of people actually think that, oh, I went to the library and I studied for 4 hours. But in reality, by the time you drove there, but every single time you took the break, every single time you checked your phone, you probably only worked for maybe 2 hours if you're lucky. And that's the magic behind tracking. Tracking is the only way that I've known at the time of this recording where you can be completely honest with yourself on the progress that you're making, and you're no longer guessing your way to success. And we're at this point point now in 2026 where you can basically track anything your heart desires. You can track your workouts. You can track how much weight you're increasing on every set and every rep. You can track your sleep. You can track your calories and the things that you're burning. You can track your nutrition. You can track how much content you post. You can track the books that you're studying and the notes that you're taking. You can track studying across school and so much more. I truly believe that there's no excuse on why you cannot track. And like I mentioned in future videos, I'm going to show you exactly what I do on Notion to make it look fun, make it look aesthetic, and then ultimately tracking myself across multiple domains so I can progress myself into becoming the highest performer I know I'm possibly capable of being. The next thing about being so good that others can't ignore you really comes down to leveraging the power of momentum. So some of you may or may not know the force of momentum, but if you've ever experienced it, it is one of the most powerful forces known to mankind. And I'll give you guys a really cool example of how momentum works. So if you've ever driven a vehicle, for example, at the time of this recording, I drive a pretty old car. And in order to get the car to a point where, you know, it's picking up a lot of gas and it's moving with speed, it takes a lot of time to get there. I have to apply my foot on the gas. It takes a few seconds. But by the time I get to the point, let's call it 60 or 70 miles per hour on the road, I'm basically cruising and the car is going very smoothly. But when the car has to come to a complete stop and has to rebuild that speed again, it takes a long time. And that's essentially the power of momentum. When you build up that momentum, especially with the tracking and the inputs that you have to do in order to be so good that others can't ignore you, you almost get to a point of cruise control. And I'm sure you know people throughout your life where you look at their lives and you're like, how are they able to balance, you know, their work, their school, their career, their relationships, and continuously add things on their plate across multiple domains. And I can guarantee you that those people are leveraging the power of momentum. Momentum is this powerful tool that once you have it in motion, it's very hard to stop. I've experienced momentum across multiple different domains. For example, content. I always relate it back to content because that's something that is on top of my mind right now. But I remember specifically when I was posting very consistently short form content, especially on Instagram, I was going months and months and months of posting it. And it became my identity. It became very easy. And then out of the bloom, I had to take a pause because I was working on something and I just told myself I want to focus my time and my energy on something else. So my Instagram stuff was taking a break. And once I stopped that momentum, it became very hard to get back into that same notion with creating that positive momentum. The same thing happened to me a few times on YouTube. And I share this because this comes down to one of the laws that Newton had shared. Basically, an object in motion can remain in motion unless acted on by an unwanted force. So the motion that you're looking for is creating that positive leverage of momentum. Once you've identified the things that you have to do consistently and you're able to do them, especially over a duration of plus 21 days, you will create this thing called momentum. It will become a part of your identity. It will become what you do on a consistent basis. And especially when it's related to the thing that you're trying to get better at, or you're trying to become so good that others can't ignore you, this is going to be one of the most powerful tools within your arsenal. And then you're going to get to this point where you're tracking your systems and you're tracking your success. You're building momentum. You're feeling progress. And you're going to see some progress within your life. But this is the biggest trap that a lot of people experience, is that they start to get a little comfortable and they start to get complacent. Oftentimes you see this with people who are in the gym. They'll make a little bit of progress. They'll see their body transform in just a little bit and they'll slowly take their foot off their gas. They'll start to cheat on their diet. They'll start to cheat on their consistency because they feel like they've arrived. They feel like they've made it. But the issue is, especially as a high performer, you've never truly made it. There's always another level that you can aspire to reach. And that's one of the most exciting things about this journey of becoming a high performer, because every single time you reach, or you think you reached the top of a mountain, you'll realize you're just at the bottom of an even smaller mountain and there's another mountain to climb. And that's one of the biggest traps that a lot of people fall into, especially being so good that they can't ignore themselves, is they struggle with understanding and realizing that you can't get comfortable on this process. You can't think that just because you had a few success days, just because you've been consistent for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months, that you can just then take your foot off the gas. This is how the biggest separation is typically formed between high performers and those who aren't. Those who are able to look at their success, look at the progress they're making, and still not get comfortable, still strive for more, still have bigger visions, bigger goals, and bigger things that they can accomplish. And this is how you can make these changes long term and ensure that you basically lap your competition. So don't trick yourself just thinking that, oh, because you made some progress that you've arrived, or because you've done something, you know everything. Like even with myself, there's this constant evolution and there's this constant progress that has to go. Like for example, when you have the chance, go back to one of my earliest videos and then compare it to the content and the way I'm articulating myself now. It's basically night and day, because I'm not the same person. I'm constantly evolving. And the goal is, you know, a few years from now, I hope you guys see the progression, especially on this channel that we're making, because it's not just about the progress we're making today. It's how can we take what we're doing today and get even better. And that mindset only comes when you realize that you can't get comfortable in this process. So when I look at myself at the gym, when I look at the progress I'm making with the career or my personal objectives, there's no way that we have to remain comfortable. Every single day, there's a day to elevate yourself. There's a day to strive to be more. But I also want you to remember to really ensure that you're implementing a sense of gratitude. So it is one thing to want more for your life, want more success, you want to become better at your craft or whatever you're working on. But there's another thing when you mistake that with not having a sense of gratitude. So don't get this mistaken that although I'm striving to become the best version of myself every single day, although I'm tracking myself, although I'm looking to leverage powerful tools like momentum and not remain complacent in the process, there is still a form of gratitude. Like, for example, it is a beautiful day today. I'm out here filming a video for all of you guys. Like, this is what I love and enjoy to do, and I'm so blessed that I'm able to do it. Or when you're working towards your goals, and I talked about this in my 1% stress video, that although these things can be challenging, although it can be this long process where it feels difficult at times, at least you're in a position where you can actually work towards your goals and aspire for more. So as a high performer, we strive to become the best version of ourselves. We know that this is a continuous process that never ends, but at the same time, we also implement a sense of gratitude, looking back from where we were, a few weeks ago, a few months ago, or a few years ago, and actually seeing that tangible progress being made in real time is extremely inspiring. And another part about being so good that others can't ignore you is you have to actually believe that you can do it. You have to believe that you're capable of much more. I talk about this all the time, but I don't know if you guys really understand when I say these things. At the end of every single one of my videos, I always remind you to always believe that you will achieve. I don't just say that because it sounds good or that it rhymes. I mean, it sounds amazing and it does rhyme, but at the same time, I say it because belief is the first step in order to make your goals, your aspirations, and really becoming a high performer. If you don't believe in yourself, honestly, do yourself a favor, click off this video right now because you're wasting your time. You have to believe, especially before things are even tangible, things have even transpired, you have to believe that you're capable of more. Like, for example, at the time of this recording this video, we're at 1,000 subscribers. I believe that in the next year, we should be way beyond 1,000 subscribers. I should look back at numbers like 1,000 subscribers and smile because that's where I started, but that's not where I was going. And all that came from that inner belief that I had within this vision. There's nobody telling me to upload these videos, or there's nobody telling me that, do this. There's this internal thought that I have. There's a lot of wisdom and knowledge that I have on these topics because I obsess about becoming the best version of myself. And I want to share it with all of you. And I also want to aspire to help others achieve the same level of success across their own given domains. But all of that comes from an internal belief system. I believe that I'm capable of more. I believe that I can achieve all the crazy desires that I do. That's why I do things like visualization. That's why I do these meditations. That's why I walk in different environments or surround myself with high performers across different realms, because I believe in my heart of hearts that I can get there. Like, when you look at a lot of these people who have achieved greatness and you see their success, I look at them as human beings who at one point in time, they weren't known for whatever they were doing, and they had to work their way there relentlessly. They had to show up on days when there was no evidence of their success, and they stay committed long enough towards their vision to see it through. But it all started because they had that internal belief. And if you ever seen someone who really talks their talk, they're talking with a lot of confidence. Some people might consider them arrogant. I actually admire those people just because at least they had the internal belief in themselves. There's so much people walking around this earth today, and I see them all the time. They typically walk with their heads down, they look all droopy, and they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe that they're capable of more. They don't believe that they can actually transform their life. Whereas us as high performers, we must believe. Belief is the foundation of anything that you're going for. So if you want to be so good that others can't ignore you, you have to already believe that that's capable. Whatever standard you have, whatever objective you're trying to achieve, you have to believe in yourself that much more. And the best part about this belief system is you don't look for others' approval. You don't look and wait for everyone to clap and cheer you on, because what happens is, as a society, we don't cheer on the people who are starting from ground zero. It's very rare that you have nothing to show for and then the world is cheering you on. It's actually when you have progress, it's actually when you have proof, then that's when the world cheers you on. But before you get there, you have to be the sole believer in your mission. You have to believe that you're capable of doing big things throughout your life. And it's an important step that I want you guys to really internalize. And I do believe that if you're still watching a video like this, you do believe in yourself. You have to have some form of belief, especially if you're taking time to watch videos like this on the internet. There's many levels to belief. I talked about this in many different videos about limiting beliefs, how we all suffer with limiting beliefs, whether you want to admit it or not, and how to actually work through them. So if you haven't seen that video, check it out. But the next thing I really want to emphasize to all of you is the last thing of being so good that they can't ignore you is you have to stay in the game long enough to see the fruits of your labor. I was reading this book and I was watching this gentleman talk about this concept as well. Whatever goal or desire that you have, I want you to multiply everything by 4. Multiply the amount of money that you're going to have to invest in order to see your vision through by 4. Multiply the time that you're going to have to spend working towards your craft by 4. Multiply the amount of hardships and setbacks that you're going to have by 4. And multiply the time that you think it's going to take to achieve your goal by 4. And the reason why this is very important is you'll realize that anything worthwhile in this life takes time. Nobody is immune to skipping the steps in order to getting to where they want to be. Every single person had to go through a lot of the trials and tribulations, and some people might have had a few head starts than others. Some people might have started from way further back, but nonetheless, we all have to go through the same obstacles. And the best thing about obstacles is when I start to reframe my mind when I look at obstacles, because I realize that certain obstacles are just the things that will take other people off the path. So let's say you're working towards becoming a professional athlete, and that's been your goal, that's been your whole life mission for as long as you can remember. There's obstacles that are going to take people off that path, whether that's an injury. Somebody might give up after an injury. Somebody might take a career opportunity over pursuing that sport. Somebody might realize that it's not working out in the timeline that they had hoped, so they're just going to give up. All those obstacles in the way are bringing you closer because you're staying committed and you're actually staying long enough within the game to see the fruits of your labor. Everything takes time. It's always going to take longer than you anticipated. I'm at the point now where any large goal that I have within my mind, I have to give myself a decade to really make it happen. It's not a decade of not doing any work. No, it's a decade of consistent work, like I told you earlier in the video, of measuring your inputs and really going at it and learning how to increase your inputs, or like my mentor calls it, standardizing before you optimize, which means before you add on more inputs, you get really good at just doing the basics. You get really good at showing up. You get really good at working on your craft. And then from there, you add on more objectives for that. But again, you still want to give yourself a decade of timeline to make your dreams a reality, because again, good things take time. So at the beginning of the video, we talked about this concept where people want to get noticed, people want to get seen. And I'm reminding you that that's not really the goal. The goal is to be so good that others can't ignore you. The goal is to chase mastery. The goal is to chase excellence, because you'll get to a point where you're that person, you're that guy, you're that girl for whatever you're aspiring to achieve. You're going to get to a point where society can't ignore how excellent you are. People are going to come to you for your expertise and your knowledge. And that is the process of becoming so good that no one can ignore you. And as a high performer, that has to become our new standard. It's no longer just trying to be good. You need to be the best. You need to be exceptional at whatever you're doing. And then as a byproduct, you're going to be amazing, that no one can ignore that. And no one can deny your success across whatever you aspire to do. If you enjoyed this video, and if you enjoyed topics like this, down below in the description, I have a waitlist for the high performance community, where we're currently building out a community where we can talk about these concepts in much more in depth. And also at the same time, for any of you who are interested in one-on-one coaching, where we can actually work through on learning how you can become so good that others can ignore you, learning how you can actually track your inputs on a consistent basis to make failure impossible, I want you to book a call in my description and we can see if you're an amazing fit for the program. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. And you know what I always say, make sure to always believe that you will achieve. My name is Miles, aka Mr. High Performance, and I am signing off. Woo!